Ready to start? Edul?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So let me share my screen. And it would be very nice if everybody turned off their mics, except for the panelists and all right. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to people who are on this webinar. My name is Farrokh Mistree, and it is my pleasure to moderate a conversation with Zoroastrian leaders on entrepreneurship, creating economic, social, and intellectual value. This webinar series is sponsored by the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce. And the notion here is building the spirit of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources control. The links to our previous webinars are at this location. The panelists today are Edul Daver, Ruyintan Mehta, and Noshir Contractor. All three are IIT alums. Edul from IIT Bombay, Ruyintan from IIT Bombay, Noshir from IIT Madras. Our synthesizer is Karishma Koka, and I will be moderating the webinar today. Our forthcoming conversation, so this is really meant to be a conversation. It's not a lecture, it's a conversation. So the panelists will seed the conversation, and then we hope to have a dialogue with the panelists, with the participants in terms of exploring interesting and other situations that we may like to take a look at. So on June the 20th, 2021, we are going to have three panelists from India. These are young Zoroastrians in India. Vispi Karkaria is studying engineering. Danish Aga is studying agricultural engineering. And Karen Pitawala is doing electrical and computer engineering in India. Vispi has just finished his bachelor's degree. Danish will be finishing his bachelor's degree, and Karen is still in her first or second year of her bachelor's degree. And so they will be talking to us about lessons from studying in India and sharing their experiences in the colleges that they've been in and how they coped with it. On July the 18th, we plan to announce a ZFN UK Scholar Program for the Humanities and Social Sciences. And we will introduce the panelists and the professors who are open to mentoring Zoroastrian scholars. They will be called ZFN scholars funded by the R.D. Setna trusts. The plan for our conversation today is that there'll be some opening statements made by Edul and myself, and then the panelists will be introducing themselves and giving a commentary on these different themes. Edul will talk about entrepreneurship associated with the creation of economic value. Ruyintan will talk about entrepreneurship associated with the creation of social value, and Noshir will talk about entrepreneurship associated with the creation of intellectual value. Karishma will come along and then synthesize what the three panelists have said, and we'll seek questions for clarification. And you can put your questions in the chat room, and we will then proceed systematically to go through and have the questions answered. And then we will have an open dialogue, which will be moderated for people to talk about anything that is associated, that comes to your mind, but primarily focused on the notion of entrepreneurship. And then there will be some closing remarks made by Yazdi Tatra, the panelists, and the moderator. So I now invite Edul Daver, the president of the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce, to introduce the notion of entrepreneurship. So Edul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Farrokh. Welcome, everyone. And to also mention that Farrokh is also an IIT graduate from Kharagpur. The word entrepreneurship is used extensively, but most people do not have a clear understanding about how it came about and what it means. Now, some of you have already heard this explanation, but I'd like to do it one more time. Joseph Schumpeter was an Austrian economist, and in 1911, he wrote a book called Theory of Economic Development in German. He explained the concept of taking good care of your business with innovation, which was most visible in startups and small companies, and called it Unternehmer in German. With the rise of Hitler, he migrated to the USA in 1932 and became a professor at Harvard. He republished his book in English in 1934, and the word Unternehmer became entrepreneur. The literal translation of Unternehmer was caretaker. It gained popularity only after 1970, when the US started facing major competitive pressures due to the oil embargo. Around 1983, Howard Stevenson, the guru of entrepreneurship at Harvard Business School, defined it as the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources controlled. When you have an opportunity and do not have sufficient resources, it requires creativity, innovation, and desire to change, which in turn implies calculated risk. It is seen most commonly in startups and small companies, but also pockets of large corporations with professionals, nonprofits, social enterprises, and in education. As such, today, we're going to be looking at entrepreneurship in a more holistic way of creating economic, social, and intellectual value. Back to you, Farrokh.
So what are we about? The World Zarathustra Chamber of Commerce, in partnership with the Zarathustra faculty and academia, envision empowering Zarathustra students to learn how to create economic, cultural, and intellectual value. The Zoroastrian Faculty Network, the mission is facilitate Zarathustra youth through higher and specialized education to pursue careers in industry, government, and academia as business entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, and knowledge entrepreneurs. And the ZFN webinars are put together to help Zarathustra youth, with support of their parents, to attain higher and specialized education. So our focus is on higher and specialized education. This initiative is supported by the R.D. Setna Scholarship Fund. And for further information, you can go to the website and certainly email Farrokh Rustamji, who is the coordinator for the R.D. Setna Scholarship Trusts. So with that, our first panelist, Edul Daver, will introduce himself and then share his thoughts with us.
Thank you. I'm located in Greenbrook, New Jersey, in the USA. Was born in Mumbai, India. I went to the Doon School in Dehradun. After that, did my Bachelor of Technology degree in Metallurgical Engineering from IIT Bombay. At that point, I went to the USA and did my master's in specializing in powder metallurgy at the University of Wisconsin. At that point, I started working for Alcan Metal Powders and continued with my MBA in manufacturing management on a part-time basis. Then came an opportunity to do a leverage buyout of the company and formed AccuPowder International. And at that point, I decided to go back to school and attended a course called OPM, Owner President Manager Program at the Harvard Business School. This was an extremely exciting program, which was done for 3 weeks, a year for 3 years in a row. And you had to be an owner and president to attend the program. And we learned as much from the co-students as with the professors. Sold up my company in 2010, retired in 2012, after which I've been involved in nonprofit initiatives, firstly with building of the New York Deremer, then as the WZCC Global President, the ZF, which is the Zarathustra Entrepreneurship Development Foundation Trustee, and involved in ZFN. My passion is building the spirit of entrepreneurship and making sure that everyone hears about it and considers it going forward. My contact information is listed. If you can free to call me, connect with me at any time. So today's presentation is going to be divided into 4 sections. The first is my academic journey. As mentioned earlier, I went to a boarding school in Doon School, Dehradun, which gave me a very all-rounded education of studies, sports, social interaction. Just for people who have not seen me, I'm quite small built, short, and I was very conscious about it as a teenager when I was in school. But I decided that I was good in sports, focused on hockey and other sports. And I not only got onto the school team, but also got the colors and earned a sports blazer. This was an immensely incident which really gave me a lot of confidence. And, you know, there's a saying that the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton. And I can categorically say that the battlefield of Edul's confidence was won on the playing fields of Doon. School really allowed me to develop the ingredients of success: confidence, discipline, and character. After school, I was admitted to the IIT in metallurgical engineering based on my strengths and love for inorganic chemistry. This was another confidence booster. It was not easy to get into IIT, and you know, getting admission does wonders for your confidence. The IIT years went over relatively smoothly. I was the first sports secretary of IIT Bombay. I happened to also have a girlfriend, Nilufer, at that time, which later on became my wife. My tendencies were capitalistic in the sense that I thought India was on the wrong track with the 5-year programs and keeping foreign companies out, fighting over the formula for Coca-Cola. It just didn't sound right to me. I couldn't articulate it. And I just decided by my 2nd or 3rd year that I was going to go to America. Got my admission, earned the Tata Scholarship. I got admission into the University of Wisconsin as a research assistant, and it was USA, here I come, and I was absolutely brimming with confidence. Now going to the second item, what were my academic and professional journey lessons? 1, happiness is not doing what you enjoy doing, but enjoying what you have to do. There are a lot of things in life that we have to do, and if you can do it with enthusiasm and accomplishment will bring you happiness. Another key category, requirement, I believe, is networking. Network. It's an extremely powerful tool, and you never know who you're going to meet where, and it's extremely important. I also knew and got confirmation that nothing beats honesty, integrity, credibility, and faith in what you're doing. You have to constantly keep learning. And as Mahatma Gandhi said, live as if you were to die tomorrow, learn as if you were to live forever. And in that regard, even WZCC is constantly evolving to become more inclusive and spreading its footprint wider. Cooperation and working together is extremely important. You can never achieve everything yourself. So basically the motto, especially in a work environment, is take the best of each of us to make the best world for all of us. And I realized that also that being capitalistic was one thing, which is good, you know, but at the same time, you cannot operate in a vacuum. You have to have social responsibility and intellectual values, and all these 3 things have to coexist. As an entrepreneur, you're working 24/7. It's extremely important that you remember to balance work with family. So those were some of the learnings from my academic and professional life. Now coming to the crust of the program of entrepreneurship, creating economic value. The first criteria for entrepreneurship is to seek and recognize an opportunity. And very often you're recognizing an opportunity which others do not recognize. Then develop a shared vision. It is, you might have a vision, but if you just force it down, it's not going to work. You have to develop a shared vision, inspire your people, motivate them, and most importantly, lead by example. You can't dictate things and then do something different yourself. The third most important, and probably the most important criteria, is act now with limited information on hand. You never have complete information. And in a business environment, in an entrepreneurship environment, you have to make a decision with what you have. So just do it. You won't do it right all the time, but that's fine. You fail, accept, learn from the failures, and embrace change. A little example here of Thomas Edison. He had conducted 1,000 experiments and failed. And a reporter asked him, sir, when are you going to give up? You failed 1,000 times. And his response was, no, I have succeeded 1,000 times. I know exactly 1,000 ways in which a light bulb cannot be made. So that's sort of the attitude you have to have when you're an entrepreneur. You have to act with purpose, passion, persistence, and providence. Providence is important. Luck always plays a part, but also, I also believe there that to some extent you make your own luck. Value driven. Your company has to be transparent. You should have a good reward system where when people do well, they're recognized. Celebrate your successes and make sure that everyone has a stake. Everyone who has a stake in the business shares in the success. Thus, you're imparting happiness to others and the cycle repeats again. So my favorite words, nothing breeds success more than success itself. I'd like to give you a short example about AcuPowder. When we did the leverage buyout, it was a marginally profitable company. It was an old company with environmental issues. We had a very confrontational union, the Steelworkers of America, and we had a very high debt load. We borrowed a lot of money and it was a high debt load. A lot of people were discouraging me from doing this, but I felt that there was an opportunity and we acquired the company. And one of the first things we did is we made sure that all the key people shared in the equity. We also made sure that we had a 20% profit sharing plan, that every employee would be share 20% of the profits. This was over and above everyone. We celebrated successes. We've done everything you can think of around New York, from going to the Great Adventure to cruises around Manhattan, and you name it. And the results were fantastic. I would call it, it was literally like magic. The union disappeared. They were actually cooperating and helping us succeed. And that shows the power of value-driven enterprise. Coming to the fourth and last item. So with that, what tips can I offer young Zoroastrians? Firstly, when you're starting your career, seek input from your parents, role models, but please, you make the final decision. It does not work when you do something just because your parents wanted you to do it. Make sure your education is well-rounded, explore, learn, and network. Stay connected with the community. It's extremely important, especially when you're abroad. Give back to humanity. Don't just talk about it, walk the talk. Keep in mind that dreams unite and fears divide. And with that, you'll find that entrepreneurship makes the impossible possible. Have faith in that. One of the recent examples of that was my experience with building the New York Daily Mail. A lot of people said it was impossible. We were all crazy, but we got it done. And a tagline connected with everything is, if you can dream it, you can do it. So with that in mind, wish all the youngsters good luck in their future endeavors, hopefully in entrepreneurship. With that, I would like to turn it over to Ruyintan Mehta, who will talk about creating social value.
Thank you very much, Edul. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you all across the world. And a big shout out to my brother and my cousins who are, again, in different parts of the US. I was born and raised in Ahmedabad, India, and I currently live in a very small town in New Jersey called Vachan. Like Edul, I also went to IIT Bombay and studied chemical engineering. And after graduating in 1970, you might call it a herd concept. Like most of my class, almost 75% of us came to the US and studied chemical engineering, got my master's at University of Connecticut, and got my master's in engineering administration at University of Utah. Currently, I serve entirely in the nonprofit mode. I am the executive director of Wheels India Niswath Foundation in the US, and concurrently serve as the president of IIT Gandhinagar Foundation. And I was the past president of IIT Bombay Heritage Foundation, which is the alumni body of IIT students from Bombay in the US. I have a very strong desire to give back to India in the areas that I'm very passionate about, basically in the areas of water, all aspects of water, health, maternal and child health, and creating innovative solutions and imparting them in higher technical education. I would classify myself as a social entrepreneurship practitioner, and please feel free to contact me at either through my email or my mobile listed here. Going on further, let me talk a little bit about the academic journey. I was a relatively good student in high school. The only school that taught English medium were two basically Jesuit schools or Catholic schools. So I went to the boys' school called St. Xavier's. And I was fortunate to have done well and cleared the IIT joint entrance exam, got into IIT Bombay, followed that by getting advanced degrees in the US. Again, part of it thanks to one of the Parsi scholarships. I received excellent education at IIT Bombay at almost zero cost. And that has helped me to be on the path of my financial and future success. In all cases, I consider the influencers as the teachers as my role models. There were several of them in school, also followed by them at IIT Bombay, and also a professor who was my advisor at one of the universities in the US. So one way of giving back is to give back Guru Dakshina. Again, a few lessons that I learned from my professional journey. I was a serial entrepreneur in the plastics molding business. Over a period of 25 years, I started from scratch, bought and sold at least about 5 different companies, and they were located in places like in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, California, North Carolina, Kentucky, and also in Brampton, Ontario. We basically hired close to over these companies, well over 1,000 people. And we remained, even while running the companies, we remained deeply involved in social causes. To give you an example, I ran a plastic company in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, where 90 out of the 120 employees or so used to have often really issues related to like their car breaking down and not having enough money to fix their car. As a result, we would have to shut down our expensive machine line, costing us well over $1,000 an hour. So in order to alleviate that issue, I followed the example that I'd seen from our ZAGNI initiative called Critical Assistance Fund. And we started a critical assistance fund where, for no questions asked, we would give any of our employees loan of 500 rupees that they had to pay back over a 2-year period with a minimal interest of 0.5%. And the employees rated that as the second best program after our health insurance. The reason I talk about that is that this not only helped us in being cost conscious, but it also allowed us to continue to operate at a higher productivity level. So I believe in maintaining a strong internal value system, and in all cases, to apply science and technology to solve practical problems. So after I sold my last company, I have been fully involved in giving back. I am involved with a fantastic NGO called Wheels, which was started by IIT alumni in the US and now has several chapters in India. Wheels stands for water, health, energy, education, rural livelihoods, and sustainability. And I serve as the director of the water leg for Wheels. Our motto is to have technology-enabled philanthropy that would help to solve some of the critical issues in India and elsewhere. I have a great deal of interest in giving back to the country of my birth, which has given me so much, and plan to have at least 50% of my net worth to go back for charitable purposes. We support young entrepreneurs with seed funding to start socially beneficial projects in water and other health and education related businesses. A few tips for young Zoroastrians. First of all, I need to let you know that I am not exactly a practicing Zoroastrian, but I strongly believe in the philanthropy part that is the DNA of us all Zarthustis. Giving back can start at any age, no matter how small your contribution may be. One can start with very small amounts while you are in college and start increasing that as you go along in your life. Join any society or organization that appeals to your passion and do not think about financial motives. I'll give you a couple of examples that we have had. Through our WIN Foundation, we have supported at IIT Kharagpur, our innovative system developed by several professors and graduate students where they take 30% of a slipstream from the sewage plant, and it goes through extensive but innovative treatment which are cost effective, and they make clean potable water at a very affordable cost. And essentially what we want to do is apply that to build such facilities in small towns of 50 to 100,000 population. Similarly, at IIT Bombay, we have supported a chemistry professor who has developed an alternative to reverse osmosis using a principle of capacitive deionization, where he takes a 5-liter flask, fills it with contaminated water, and by having carbon nanotube coated cellulosic thread, he will apply a current across a AA battery and achieves 95% removal efficiency with very little exhaust. So finally, these are the kind of examples that the young can follow, and do not worry about what financial motive you will achieve first. Last but not the least, it is my own feeling that we Zoroastrians in India have been admired mainly because our charitable giving has been secular in our approach. So I would urge you to be secular without carrying your religion on your sleeve. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to Noshir, who will talk more about intellectual entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Ruyintan. I'm delighted to be here. It's a pleasure to see over 100 participants who are attending this session. As mentioned, my name is Noshir Contractor. Right now, I'm located in Evanston, Illinois, which is down the road by the lake from Chicago. I was born in Chakradharpur, which at the time was in the state of Bihar in India, and now I believe it's in the state of Jharkhand. My background, I started out with going to high school in a small towns while my dad was in the railways getting transferred. My dad, who's, by the way, joining this, and my 93-year-old dad, who's actually joining this session here today, along with my sister from Mumbai. And then I did most of my high school education at St. Xavier's, but the one in Calcutta, also a Jesuit school, and then +2 in Lucknow, and then got my bachelor's in electrical engineering from IIT Madras, and then went to the University of Southern California to get a PhD in communication from the Annenberg School for Communication. Following that, I spent 20 years on the faculty at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, and currently I'm a faculty member at Northwestern, where I have my appointments in Department of Industrial Engineering and Management Science and Department of Computer Science in the School of Engineering, the McCormick School of Engineering, in the Department of Management and Organizations at the Kellogg School of Management, and in the Department of Communication Studies in the School of Communication. What I'm going to talk today about mostly is, and I'm delighted to do this, is to talk about the role of entrepreneurship in the business of actually creating intellectual value. And that's what we mean by research. And we take it for granted that everyone understands what that term means, but just to make it as explicit as possible, in creating intellectual value through the process of research is the systematic approach of trying to ask questions about any phenomena, whether it's a physical phenomena, if it's a living phenomena, if it's a social phenomena, and ask the question in a systematic manner about why certain things happen. And then once we understand that, then using that knowledge to help improve the situation. In some ways, it's the distinction between the basic sciences, which asks the fundamental questions about why something is, why things happen, and then use that in engineering to see if we can engineer better systems across the board. My passion throughout my career has obviously been to advance these questions, to understand and enable, but also then to mentor students, including undergraduate students and even high school students. In fact, just within the last couple of years, I had the pleasure of hosting a high school student by the name of Rustam Ichaporia, who worked in my lab, at the lab that I direct here at Northwestern called SONIC, the Science of Networks and Communities. And I'm very pleased that Rustam, while in my lab as a high school intern, wrote a conference paper that was accepted for presentation in Spain and is now an undergraduate in computer science at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Again, my contact information is there. And if you can't remember that big URL, feel free to just Google my first name and last name, and you should be able to find it. One of the values of not having a generic name like John Smith is that it's easy to Google it. Now on to my academic journey. I'm a firm and passionate believer in what some have called whole brain education as opposed to left brain education or right brain education, where you're either good in engineering aspects or you're good in the creative and artistic aspects. I think that one of the reasons I'm very proud to be here at Northwestern is because our Dean of Engineering has been very passionate in terms of being able to push for whole brain education. And my life is an example of that. My undergraduate degree was in electrical engineering. And I have to tell you that when I was getting ready to graduate from high school and go to college, I did not want to go in for engineering. And I thought I was going to go into the diplomatic service. And my parents basically challenged me to think about going into engineering. IIT was much less competitive then than it is now. And basically, when I told them I didn't want to do it, my mom told me that my dad told her that I didn't want to go to IIT because I wouldn't be able to get into IIT. And so my mom pleaded with me to say, just write the entrance exam to see if you can get in, prove to your dad that you're smart enough to get in, and then you're off the hook. I did write the exam, I did get in. And then, of course, my parents persuaded me that I should go to IIT Madras as long as I agreed that after I graduated, I could do whatever I want, which is exactly what I ended up doing. I don't regret that at all. I think I was very, very fortunate to have had my undergraduate in electrical engineering. And then basically since then, I've taken what I learned there and brought that framework to the study of social networks and how we use social networks to organize. Today, a lot of my work focuses on how different technological innovations have disrupted the way we work, whether it is the web, whether it is artificial intelligence, whether it's robots, and whether it's trying to create how we can be preparing teams that will be headed to places like Mars in the future, in the near future. I'm a firm believer that innovations and new ideas in creating intellectual value really comes from combining existing knowledge in novel ways. There is the old adage that there's nothing new under the sun, but there are combinations that are always new under the sun. And that is taking ideas from different areas and juxtaposing them together, I think is a very powerful way to combine what is conventional with what is novel and use that to the right mix of those brings new innovations. I personally have a strong commitment in my academic journey to keep my research honest. And what do I mean by that? By being honest, I mean making my research responsible to practical needs, so that whenever I'm doing research, if someone says, why are you doing that? I have a very clear answer, whether it is, as I was mentioning a few minutes ago, I'm working closely with NASA now to help them figure out how can you send a team of 6 international people on a 3-year mission to Mars without them killing each other while being in a small confined environment in an isolated and extreme context. There is another context in which I'm studying where we are looking at a global scaling of global health solutions. So with funding from the Gates Foundation, I've looked to see how can we then convince health workers in India, in Bihar, or the population at large in villages in Kenya to adopt global health practices that are good for them, because we know it's good for them. It's one thing to know that this works, but it's a different to scale it up to large practices and use networks to do that. These are 2 examples. There are many others in terms of how human robot teams are now playing a bigger role. My main secret in which I have followed throughout this entire process is that one must, in creating intellectual value, one must build deep expertise in one area. Some would call this being a specialist. Some would say it's knowing more and more about less and less, but recognizing that the problems and challenges we face in society are knowing more and more about more and more things. And so you have to build deep expertise in one area, but then collaborate with others who are building deep expertise in other related areas that will help you together collaborate on the challenges. As I mentioned, my research has been driven and motivated to address these kinds of grand societal challenges, the kinds I just mentioned. I will also say that in creating intellectual value, there are 2 parts to it. There is the good ideas part of it. Some call that the easy part. I'm not sure it is, but it is certainly something that can be done while you are sitting back and thinking and reflecting. And some people call that the exploration phase. The real challenge then is taking those ideas that you've thought through and then implementing them or executing them, or some people refer to that as the exploitation phase. And executing good ideas and following up on them requires persistence, it requires tenacity. I could not have done anything that I'm able to do right now if it was not without building and bridging networks across different disciplines. I mentioned that I myself have appointments in so many different disciplines, but almost any project that I have done in the last 3 decades has always involved people from different disciplines outside any of the ones that I'm talking about. Across geography, a lot of my collaborators come from all over the world and at different career stages, all the way from high school students to people like my mentors, who I still continue to work closely. And what I would say is these are team efforts. This is never an individual effort. Intellectual pursuit today is, and perhaps never was, a solo venture. And be generous in giving credits to others, because there's plenty of credit to be given all around. In closing, then I would say that as a tip for a young Zoroastrian, I already told you the story of how I had to negotiate with my parents whether I was going to do engineering and then what I was going to do after that. I say that the same is true, as was mentioned earlier. Listen to what your parents have to say, but be able to negotiate with them so that you can have your cake and eat it too. I'm not sure why I remember this from my younger days, but there's something about the Zoroastrian zest and zeal that seems to be quite unique in many of these situations. And I think it certainly something that has served me well. There's a certain fire that we seem to have. 2 last comments. When making networks, ask not what the network can do for you, but what you can do for the network. There has been an enormous amount of research that shows that the reciprocity ring will take care of you. If you go to other people, not saying what can that person do for me, but what can I do for that person? However important or senior that person may be, there is something you can do for that person. And down the road, that ring will come back and pay off for you as well. And then finally, in the short term, we are talking about you making networks. You've already heard that even from Edul's network slogan. And while in the short term, you make networks, in the long term, networks make you. And with that, I will hand things over to Karishma Koka.
Thank you, Noshir. Thank you, Ruyintan. And thank you, Edul. I'm Karishma. You know me. Some of you know me by now. I'm a neuroscientist, made by both my parents and the Zoroastrian faculty network and all the people over here. My position is that when people come together, it's like flints coming together, sparks flying, and joy emerging, ushta emerging, happiness and harmony. And I seek to empower individuals through education and build between people and organizations. And what we've seen today from Edul, Ruyintan, and Noshir, while individually seems somebody's point of view, when you put them all together, the emergent property to me is a lot of Asho Zarathustra's work from the Gathas. Edul says, if you can dream it, you can do it. Ruyintan says, technology-based social impact allows us to give back. And Noshir says, think networks because networks make us. And if we look at what we've been taught from our childhood, that when pure purpose based on Asha can lead to a good mind, Bahumana, we end up with the concept of strength and righteousness that was by our choice, called Kshatriya Vairya. And in the 43.1 verse of the Gathas, which says, happiness comes to one who brings happiness to others, it is really a joy to see that intellect and action can bring about the good of all. And in the Zoroastrian community, the WZCC, the World Zartoshti Chamber of Commerce, has brought about an overlaying domain system between all these three types of information: the economic, the social, and the intellectual, so that the emergent property of entrepreneurship going beyond resources controlled actually, like Edul says, is not just creativity and innovation based on integrity and industriousness with a desire to change, but brings about the concept of being a caregiver and a builder. This actually has been brought up in the Yasnaha 33.3. The concept of caregiver is the word vidas, where we're supposed to be caregivers for everything we build and everyone around us. And Edul talked about confidence, discipline, and character combined with honesty, integrity, and credibility, so that we can act with responsibility in the now. In the now in the Gathic word is nuchit, so that purpose, passion, and persistence can allow us to build networks, holistically develop from education to entrepreneurship, with highly specialized education with which the goodness that we build can be shared with others. And while the learning needs to be in the now, the continued learning, the cooperation, and the intellectual value that is built with shared vision and persistence brings about the good and the well-being of everyone around us, which then, like he says, can be shared through adaptability, no doubt, but can be shared in the concept of Rafedrai, so that we act now and are value-driven, and we explore, learn, and network. And Ruyintan talked about how this science and technology through networks can be used to build practical solutions to problems. He talked about the capacitive deionization of water. He talked about the sewage treatment facilities. And this is the concept realistically of circular economy and a sustainability strategy, so that Asha can lead to Ameritat through time. So Ruyintan talked about social causes and the implications of cost and value with passion, technology, and philanthropy, and the concept of seed funding. And seed funding brings us back to the WZCC and the ZF, so that interest-free loans have been given. Ruyintan is interested in giving back, and this adds value to people's lives, so that education can lead to entrepreneurship. So that's the social aspect. So Edul talked about economic aspect, Ruyintan talked about the social aspect, and then Noshir brought it all together, stemming from an intellectual perspective. Noshir started with the concept of whole brain education, so that we can steer research and combine knowledge, build networks across disciplines. He also talked about being honest and relevant. So his concept of honesty and integrity is very practical, so that it is of relevance to solving problems now and in the future. He said technology builds on disruptive innovation, so that being systematic in our inquiry, together with combining things in novel ways, together with teams in a collaborative spirit where credit is shared, allows us to build on what's called the reciprocity ring. So that while persistence allows us to build now, the ring that we build builds us today and in the future. Once again, he's touched upon Gothic concepts and the spirit of questioning for the sake of Asha, which is the 51.5. Vispata peresas, question all matters for the sake of building progress for all. So in conclusion, let's think about our own journey, the passion and the purpose with which we all, whether we are students starting on our journey, looking for seed financing as individual entrepreneurs, or as CEOs of companies, listening to people, observing things grow, reflecting, and then deciding for further growth. That is the 30.2, which says question everything, listen, reflect, and then grow. But grow needs action. And so in the Yatahu Vairya prayer, we say, Shiot naish angeush mazdai. Let us take good action. And like Edul, Ruyintan, Noshir, Farrokh Mistree, everyone on the ZFN team, Behram, Yazdi, say action needs to be holistic. It needs to work in the economic, the social, the intellectual domains, and the overlap, that beautiful overlap between these three domains is the emergent property of the World Zarathustra Chamber of Commerce and its subsidiary, the Zoroastrian Faculty Network. So that the good, the happy, the prosperity that comes from this is Ushta. And Zarathustra has said, Ushi is to shine. Ushida is that which gives intelligence. Ushta is happiness and prosperity for all. And Ushtana is the heat of the heart. Like Edul says, the fire in each one's belly. And when we build the fire in everybody's belly together for the good of all, we work together and celebrate. So with that, Ushtate to everybody. And we will now take the questions specifically addressed to each panelist after the closing remarks that Farrokh Mistree will moderate. And after that, we will have a dialogue. So I'll hand over to Farrokh Mistree first for the specific moderated questions.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Karishma. Thank you for people who've been putting things in the chat. And I have seen questions for Edul and for Ruyintan. So let me start with questions for Edul. Khurshid has asked you the question, Edul, please take a look in the chat as to how do you deal with the prospect of having lost the making a loss in your first business. How do you deal with that? And then Smita has followed up and asked the question, what kept you going when you had adversity? And Ruyintan has asked the question, how do you create luck? So there are 3 questions here.
Yeah, thank you. All 3 are very relevant and loaded and difficult, but I'll do my best. When you get into a new venture, Kurshin, first thing you need is confidence. You have to have confidence that you can tackle the problem, positive outlook, and basically, as far as being concerned about losses, yes, there's always some risk, but we talk about calculated risk. So we don't want you to get into something which is a gamble. And just to illustrate it with a very simple example, when someone crosses a road, look to the right, looks to the left and crosses, it's a calculated risk. If you close your eyes and cross the road, it is a gamble. So we don't want to get in, you don't want to get into a business where you're absolutely a gamble. So risk is not a dirty word. Calculated risk is not a dirty word. And once you've done a little bit of, analysis of it and have the confidence that it'll work, go ahead and do it, and you'll find that it'll work out. Okay, if you are skeptical and afraid and diffident and going in half-heartedly, the chances are it'll be much more difficult. Going on to Smita's problem, yes, there's always ups and downs. What I found is, as a manager of a large company and as an entrepreneur, the difference is that the highs are higher and the lows are lower. So when things go wrong, obviously this is more worrisome. And when things go right, you're happier than you'll ever be as an employee. But if you've done your homework, face the challenges in an incremental way. If you're expecting for a big bang, it probably won't happen. Set small goals and the team achieves it. You build happiness, you build confidence, happiness comes with it, and you set more goals. So we had like dozens of objectives, and every time we would meet the objectives, we would celebrate. Things can go terribly wrong. For example, 2008, 2009 recession was a disaster for most businesses, as it was for AccuPowder. And if you know, in a union, when you want to reduce the business, you have to lay off the junior most people and the senior people keep working. We went to the union and said, look, we've shared in the successes all these years. We want to share in the downturn together. So we're not going to lay off everyone. We're going to reduce everyone's salary by 20%. And basically, we made a promise, but you would continue working all the 5 days. We would reduce the salary. You won't reduce the work. But I'll promise you that when things improve, you'll get paid back the 20%. And to my surprise, the union accepted that, and we were able to, you want to call it, survive the downturn, and it worked good. I don't know if that's, and the third question was, how do you make your luck? If you've got something that you want to happen, for example, you're looking for someone to suddenly come in and say, yeah, I'm going to invest in your business. It doesn't just happen, join WZCC, go to its meetings, talk to people, network, and then find that someone is there at that meeting and says, okay, I'm going to give you X amount of dollars and invest with you. Now, you'll say that's luck, but I would say that's, you made your luck because you took the trouble of participating and networking. And this is an exact example that there's a gentleman in Hasotia in, I think, Ahmedabad, who has a business. And he said he didn't have the money to come to our AGM in Bangalore. And we said, look, it's very important that you'll meet people, do come. So he said he'll come, and we sort of gave him a room free of charge. And there he met an investor. which invested in his business with a large amount of money. And it was all because of taking the extra effort to coming to Bangalore and making his own luck here.
Thank you.
I hope I've given a reasonable answer to the questions.
Thank you. There's a question for Noshir from Khurshid. And her question reads, Noshir, could you share advice for the latest ways one could effectively network in the digital age? In other words, say a little bit more about your research projects and what you're doing.
Sure. I think that, well, thanks again for that question, Khurshid. And it was indeed Khurshid's son, Rustam, that I was referencing, who worked in the lab and is now at the University of Illinois. In response to advice for the latest ways that one could effectively network in the digital age, I think that it's important to recognize that all the different ways in which we have technologies at our fingertips now are not necessarily a substitute for face-to-face interaction, even though in the COVID period, it has certainly been a panacea and a game changer for all of us. But what we are learning is that there are ways in which we can think about technologies as being part of a broader ecosystem when it comes to our approaches to understand networks. Events such as the one we are in right now are very well served through technologies, where we have the benefit of being able to join from around the world at low cost in terms of travel and low cost in terms of environmental carbon footprints. And the added benefit that we can see each other's names associated with their faces, which is sometimes not always as easy to do when we are in person. However, while for big meetings like this, these technologies are really useful, when you want to meet someone for the first time, those kinds of meetings are best done face-to-face. You could think of Facebook as a Rolodex. It's not so much your active network as much as it's your dormant network. But it makes it easy for you to activate a dormant network when you can easily find out exactly which high school student buddy of yours is where, what's happening in their lives. And so it allows, in many ways, the lubrication, the facilitation of activating networks that are latent, that are dormant, on a much easier level than what we could do otherwise. And so a lot of what the technologies do is allow us to be able to play an important role alongside face-to-face interactions, and frankly, augmented face-to-face interactions, where we talk and text and share files and share sketches at the same time. So there's a lot of excitement in this area. If you're interested in the role of how the web is helping with this, I would certainly recommend a particular episode that I did recently with a podcast series that I'm hosting called Untangling the Web. And in that podcast series, which you could get from any of the standard, iTunes or Apple Podcasts or Google or Spotify, et cetera. But in a recent episode, I spoke to the chief scientist at Microsoft, who was also the advisor to the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella. And she said in that interview, they've done a big study at Microsoft of what we've learned from being in the pandemic. And the bottom line is that there are some things that from technology that are going to continue. And then there are other parts of what we want to do is go back face to face. So we have to recognize that it is this blend, this ecosystem.
Thank you. We are now moving into the general discussion, and I have three people lined up. One is Farrokh Rustamji, the other one is Sangram Mudali, and the third one is Ruyintan. So I'm inviting Farrokh Rustamji to unmute himself and to make his statement. Keep it short so we can get many more people into it.
Thank you, Farrokh. I would like to ask a question to Edul. That I'm very happy to see all the three panelists are IITians. And I would like Edul to give advice to young students who aspire to join IITs. In these days, there is a very tough competition exam, and then people have to spend a lot of money to undertake those exams, testing, learning, with coaching classes. In those days, I don't know how difficult it was, but can you give some guidance to the students who wish to go in for IIT graduation? Thank you.
Okay, so that question is to me, Farrokh, about how to get students into IIT.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, firstly, the student should want to get in. should have the fire in the belly to want to get in. It is very competitive. So it's a combination of aptitude, how good the student is inherently, his training, his preparation, what special effort he's going to make to prepare for the examinations. And then, you know, it's a competitive environment, and if he is prepared, hopefully he will get in. You know, I don't know, Farrokh, you being in the academic field, can you add to that?
Yes. Let me tell you how I look at things now. In this day and age, I believe that it doesn't matter what you study. As long as you do it well, you enjoy what you're doing, and you do it to gain value and to learn how to create value and give back to the community. We have people who do social work. We have artists. We need engineers. We need scientists. We need politicians. We need people from all these disciplines. When we were growing up, we only had two choices. If you were smart, you either became a doctor or an engineer. I mean, that's the only choice we had. In this day and age, we need to encourage our children to follow their dreams, to have dreams. And if they have their dream, they will be happy. And so my answer to you, Farrokh, is the following. Happy people are always successful. Successful people are not necessarily happy. Pursue happiness. It'll make you happy. Parents will be happy. You'll be content. And with that attitude, I think we should approach our younger generation. Not going along and saying you have to be an engineer. Not going along and saying you have to be a doctor. Not going along and saying you have to take my business. But saying, aha, go to a university to learn how to create value, whether it's poetry, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's business, it doesn't matter. That's my answer to you.
Thank you very much, Farrokh. Thank you, Edul. I'm sure the students who read this will be and hear this webinar will be inspired. Thank you.
Great. So now I'd like to call on Sangram Mudali. Sangram Mudali is an academic son of ours, Janet and mine, and he went back to the United States to his village, his ancestral village, and he started an institution called the National Institute of Science and Technology. He is an entrepreneur, but entrepreneur from the academic side, who also has to take care of business. So he's a social entrepreneur, a business entrepreneur, and an intellectual entrepreneur, all three combined. So I'm going to invite him to share a few words about what kept him going. Very short, Sangram. The mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Farrokh. I hope I'm audible to everybody. Thank you, the excellent speakers who are lined up before me. This is just a 2-minute. I would like to share my experience after coming back from the United States and being a student of Farrokh Mistree. I declare myself as a lifelong, he's been my mentor, my philosopher, my guide. I've been here since 1996 when I came at a young age of 33 and started my first educational venture called the National Institute of Science and Technology, an AICTE state central government approved technical institution established in one of the poorest southern districts of Odisha. And till date, in 25 years, we are celebrating our silver jubilee. We have graduated over 15,000 alumni who are now all over the world. Just to take an example, I was in Seattle last summer and we had a get together. We had about 50 people working in Microsoft, Amazon, Google, who just came together on a day's notice to be there. So we have what we call as taken students from the most poor sections of the society and then send them to California and send them to Google. So what we would say is K2K, institute. That means you take a poorest district. If you find it out in the map of India, it is probably Koraput, and from Koraput to California with a K. So That's what this thing has been. But most importantly, I would just focus a few into incubator, which we have opened. Farrokh was in 2006 gracious enough to come to our institution in Berhampur and open the first entrepreneurship development cell, what we used to call the EDC, much before the times had come. And Farrokh opened it up, and initially we had about 7 entrepreneurs who took birth in that, and 4 of them are doing very well. 2 have gone back to their jobs, and 4 or 5 of them, as Farrokh pointed out, have done excellently well, and they are now out of the incubation. Now, let me tell you about the pain points of running an incubator, and I would seek the advice of almost everybody, who has been. We have talked about wheels, water. I mean, we have excellent problem statements in the water. I was amazed. My son at University of Pennsylvania gave me a list of hackathon winners for this year. And some of these hackathon ideas are excellent to try out in a large scale. And therefore, what is important is mentoring. So just like network, I would think mentoring is very key. Not only technology mentoring, which we have in plenty. In fact, we need business plan mentoring, because no longer are we going to be local, we are going to be global. Now, in a global setup, I think most companies do not have the yardstick. When you are 23 or 25 years old, you practically don't know much about the global world. You're so focused on your R&D. So my question is to all the panelists is, how do we really do a good business plan, and how do such senior people help us in vetting such business plans, and take a little bit of their times, and we organize ourselves into business plan mentoring. The second is, of course, initial funding. Now, when I say initial funding, it's not a lot of funding. Maybe 5 to 10 lakh rupees is enough for a person to say a no to a standardized company like Infosys or Wipro or so on and so forth, which pay peanuts but extract a huge mileage out of these talented children. And I think more and more entrepreneurs would be happy with some level of initial funding. So that is the second pain point. And the last pain point, of course, is COVID being the biggest problem, and we have to get out of it with a positive spirit. And today, after hearing the 4 panelists, I'm very enthused, and I'm going to share their slides with their kind permission. And I've taken away a lot of positives from there, and I'm going to share it with all my 50 or so entrepreneurs who are there in my incubator presently. Thank you so much, Farrokh.
Thank you, Sangram. So now Ruyintan has posed a question on how can the panelists take the WZCC to the next level. And I would like to take the privilege of the moderator to invite Behram Pastakia to answer that question. So Behram.
Muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that question. I saw the 3 circles overlapping each other, the Venn diagram. And my immediate reaction to that is, this is all well and good. We've got the intellectual entrepreneurship, the social entrepreneurship, economic entrepreneurship together. But entrepreneurs by themselves are not able to solve the world's big problems that Noshir was talking about. And I'll illustrate that with COVID-19. We had fantastic intellectual entrepreneurship in developing the vaccine. We had fantastic economic entrepreneurship by all these companies, Pfizer, Serum Institute, all coming forward to do it. We had social entrepreneurs who want to push it. But at the end of the day, it was the governments who had to execute this. There are some big problems which cannot be done just by entrepreneurs. We have to, as Noshir was saying, reach out to a wider group. So the question posed to WZCC now is, in this model, where do we bring in the government? Where do we bring in the public-private partnerships? Where is the space in the thinking of the WZCC to include NGOs, to include an individual that the last speaker from Orissa just mentioned? He's going to take this webinar to his 50 entrepreneurs. Where is the space in WZCC thinking to include such individuals? Those are the questions we should pose. And in a sense, to answer Ruyintan's question, reconfigure the thinking of WZCC so that we improve our footprint of WZCC all over the world. I want to take this opportunity to thank Farrokh Mistree for initiating the ZFN, Zoroastrian Faculty Network. Right now, it is still a baby. Just like WZCC is an offshoot of a small committee of Fizana. In the last 20 years, it has grown and grown its own footprint. I hope in the future, next 10, 20, 15 years, that the ZFN also will have its own identity and be able to cater to the needs of our next generation. So thank you for your time and listening to me.
Thank you. Mehran Sefri is in Iran, and he is involved with the Iranian diversity community. And I'm going to invite him to say a few words, Mehran, about how the ZFN and the WZCC could reach out to fellow Zartustis in Iran to bring them into our community or help them participate in this community effort. So Mehran, short stuff, please.
Yes, Farrokh, thank you so much. I am in Iran and we are not politically, economically doing well, but many of Zoroastrians have been entrepreneurs, especially for small, like hospitality in Yazd. They have started several old homes, renovated, and made them to use as hotels. We have a Chamber of Commerce in Iran. We meet weekly and we have speakers. Recently, it's been all online. We want people to introduce themselves, tell about their ideas. We had some lectures, we had some seminars. And I hope that once the economic situation, the political situation gets better, we have a lot of youth that are unemployed and would love to get started with their own careers. That's all I can say now.
Great. Mehran is also involved with doing some social work, dealing with improving the quality of life of the planet and the people living in it. So Mehran, can you talk a little bit about the initiative that you're working with Ariana? But very short, just an introduction to the concept that you have. And it's possible that this may be something that Ruyintan Mehta could help you with and be interested in. Mehran? We've lost him. All right. So we've now come to the stage where if there's anybody who would like to say something. Yes, Natalie Gandhi, go ahead.
Hi, I wanted to go back and ask a question, mostly directed to Edul, but perhaps Farrokh as well. My question has to do with your definition of entrepreneurship, where you stress Schumpeter quite strongly and take strong inspiration from him. That's very interesting. And I think right-headed too. I enjoy him too. I wonder if you have interest in other theories of entrepreneurship and how they relate to our vision of entrepreneurship. We have a whole concept of disciplined entrepreneurship coming from MIT. There's a notion of effectuation that is also inspired by an Indian leader. That is of building entrepreneurial capacity through creating an environment that effectuates a creative sphere for the entrepreneur. And there are many other visions of entrepreneurship. I think Stanford is particularly strong in a tech venture conception. And it's a whole field of study. So I'm wondering if we might want to have like a deeper investigation into this, or if it's sort of beside the point. How do you see it? And if we might want to have a web page at ZFN at that website that would kind of pursue this further and look at that. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, to answer your question, Natalie, yes, there are a lot of different ways entrepreneurship can be answered. But again, keeping in mind that we want to be consistent, keep it simple. I thought this was sort of the best one-line definition, which encompasses almost all the other definitions can in some way fall into this one. Yes, there's branches of it, and we can, from an academic point of view, go. But for WZCC, the objective is to keep it simple, understandable, so we can get some mileage out of it.
Thank you. Omid would like to put in a word, a very short 30 seconds, Omid.
Just wanted to say thank you so much for this great webinar. COVID was a horrible thing for the world, but it has a lesson for all of us that we have to work together in order to resolve things. And this webinar is definitely something that they don't teach in university. Professors usually they don't teach how we think of others, how we think not to be individualistic, but think globally. And I live in Silicon Valley. Most of the companies, they just think of themselves. They just try to protect themselves. And this is something is really needed for not only in US, but the entire world. Thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Ariana, who is from Iran. And she has been working on putting together an app which is to support social entrepreneurship and also to deal with the environment and things like that. And she is, I'm going to invite her to, in a very short time, to share with us her vision, just her vision. 30 seconds. Ariana, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all here. Actually, Mehran was supposed to talk about this, but he faced some technical problem. In this app, we aim to have a kind of integrated social network platform where people will have this opportunity to share information, news, stories, everything about environment. It is something like Facebook or LinkedIn, but it is more practical where people can take actions. And if there are some events, campaigns, or any kind of voluntary activities related to the protection of water, land, wildlife, so they can share their news in this platform. The website and apps will be available publicly around 2 weeks later on. We are making already the teams, and we would be happy if in this group we have people, technical or business developer, to join us for this platform. Basically, this social network will start from London, where I'm based in, and I work at the University College London. And in the future, I'll send you the QR where you will have access to download and install this app. If you have any questions, I'm happy to talk about, because the time was short. I try to summarize it as best as possible.
So, Ariana, put your email in the chat, and perhaps Ruyintan and others will get in touch with you. Anybody who's interested, right? Yeah. So with that, we come to the last segment of our webinar, and I'm going to share my screen again and invite the panelists to make closing statements. So, Edul?
Yeah, thank you. As we have discussed today, entrepreneurship is an extremely powerful concept and tool to solve today's problems. Entrepreneurship encourages us to be first, to be different, to be best. We also need to keep in mind that creating economic value cannot exist in a vacuum. We have to be conscious of also creating social and intellectual value. And WZCC has been evolving in this direction. To answer Ruyintan's question, we are collaborating with as many different associations as possible. So we are trying to build on this. And when we combine all these three values, we are keeping in mind our Zarathustri values simultaneously of good thoughts, good words, and most importantly, good deeds. I would also like to argue that today's problems of global warming, UN sustainable goals, and such cannot be achieved without thousands of small and large entrepreneurial initiatives. And I agree with Behram in some cases with collaborating also with the government. WZC has been growing and evolving. As I mentioned, now we're looking at a wider footprint, but also would like people to know that we've created financing possibilities. We've got a financing initiative in India, and in North America, we've just started ZF, the Zoroastrian Entrepreneurship Development Foundation. Now, this is money available for startups without interest, zero interest. And we would certainly like to spread the word and get suitable applications for this. As Charles Darwin has said, it is not the strongest of the species who survive, nor the most intelligent. It is the ones most adaptable to change. And we have to embrace change. So let me end by saying, today is the right time for the right idea, and opportunities are limitless for the bold and restless who are willing to dream big and work hard without fearing failure, get up and try again until they succeed. And then they will find that nothing breeds success more than success itself. So to end with my tagline, if you can dream it, you can do it. Thank you.
Ruyintan.
Well, I'll start out by saying that we Zarathustris, going back more than 1,000 years ago, were very fortunate to have landed up on the shores of Gujarat, because that to me is the ultimate in entrepreneurship. Gujaratis taught us how to be entrepreneurs, and our forefathers, like the Tatas and the Wadias, in conjunction with working with the British, ended up making a ton of money all across the world, and then they gave it back in the form of philanthropy. So they practiced both entrepreneurship as well as social impact. And that is my message to all of us, that particularly those of us who are in India and also abroad, that give back to your community, because you will only earn back in spades. We are admired, truly admired in India. I am very active on many of our IIT web groups, and you will see the amazing amount of goodwill that we have generated. It's just totally amazing. So keep up the great work. But again, I would like to caution you, don't be insular and be more secular. Thank you.
Noshir.
Again, thanks for allowing me to be a part of such an incredibly energizing and inspiring event here today. And I would just touch on a couple of things that have been going through my mind as I heard some of the Q&A and the discussion. One of the things that I would say is that a little bit of funding that can provide a seed can be really valuable in the long term. I still remember that when I got admission to come to grad school at the University of Southern California, my my mom and my dad said, you know, you should try to apply for a scholarship or a loan scholarship. And I remember getting one from the J.N. Tata Endowment and from the Wadia Scholarship. Some of them were not only for Parsis, it was for anyone. And I remember my schoolmates from IIT Madras came and also applied for it. And it helped to pay for my airline ticket. It helped to pay for my, to buy me a new suitcase, and actually got a tailored suit that I could then go with me to take with me to Los Angeles. And of course, as soon as I got my first regular faculty position at Illinois, one of the first checks I wrote was to help pay back that, because it was going to be something that would then be able to provide other people's support. Since then, you know, my family has created a scholarship for schools, for educational scholarship for students from Baroda, where my parents were living when my mom passed away. I think that having those kinds of activities are what I would call a multiplier effect. It's a small amount of money, but that can go a long ways. The one thing I would leave us with today that may be a little controversial, but I'm going to go ahead and say it here, is that I feel that, as was mentioned previously also by my co-panelists, the number of students from India who graduate from places like IIT coming for advanced education and academic careers in the United States is dropping dramatically. You know, when I came, it was, I think Edul mentioned that 75% of his class came to the US. When I came in 1983, about 80 to 85% of my class came here. Today, that number has fallen to less than 3 to 4%, if that. While that is great news for India in terms of avoiding the brain drain, it's great for the people who are getting great jobs in industry in India, it has been a huge loss for academia. Because a lot of the Indians who came to this country came here and then stayed on to get a PhD and pursue academic careers. That particular pipeline has absolutely been diminished dramatically. And what I will encourage us Parsis to think about is that we have a legacy of some really, really well-known academics who and researchers more generally who came out of our community. And in addition to being an entrepreneur in along the lines that we've talked about in the Venn diagram, I think somebody who wants to make more of a foundational goal in academia is the way we will increase that intellectual value part of the entrepreneurship equation. And it is an entrepreneurial activity. You're taking risks. It's a risky business. All scientific research is a risky business. And you take chances, you work hard at it. And sometimes what you find is, as was mentioned previously, is you learn from your failures as well. But I will certainly encourage some of the younger Parsis to think about making that intellectual value as their prime entrepreneurial goal.
Thank you. Yes, Dee.
What can I say now? I hope you all had a wonderful, holistic entrepreneurial feast, economic, social, and intellectual. So to continue the dialogue, I would urge all of you to visit the ZoroastrianFacultyNetwork.org, sign up there so that you get continuous updates for the new programs as well as for various scholarships, mentorship programs, internships, etc., etc. So if you go to the website, you can also go to the Facebook page and enroll yourself there. And of course, we have a YouTube page, which we displayed earlier, where you get recordings of all our seminars. Thank you.
So now it's my turn. So I want to thank you all for having participated in this webinar. It has been a great experience working with the panelists and of course Karishma and Edul Daver and Behram and the others who have made this thing possible. The message I'd like to leave you with is the following. I have a slightly different view to Noshir in terms of academia. I agree with Noshir that we need to have more Zoroastrian students becoming professors, because I believe that being a professor is the best job in the world. The only thing better than that is being married to one. And so I'm blessed. Where I disagree with Noshir is the following. I think it is imperative for us to send our Zoroastrian people who we've educated as faculty back to India, or back to Iran, or back to wherever they came from. Why? Because this is the idea. We have this milk story as to when we landed in Gujarat, the priest put out the milk thing, and another priest, the Jadi Rana, sent the milk thing, and the priest put in the sugar. I think this is what we need to do. We need to educate our people here in business, in social work, in academia, and then send them back to make a difference, to add that sweetness to the community from which they came. So that is my, where I agree with Noshir and disagree with him at the same time. So I'd like you to think about it from that perspective. So I now call this, the official part of this meeting to a close. Yazdi will stop recording. The recording will be there. And then we will stick around for anybody who'd like to chat and say hi or bye or whatever you'd like to do to communicate. So please hold on. Yazdi will keep this thing